Hi everyone, I'm Helen from Susan's family. Today, I'm sharing with you the Animals in Dream Blanket, the bear design. It consists of the main fabric piece, and edging, and decorations. Let's start by crocheting the main fabric piece. Once done, we'll work a border around the edges in rounds. Lastly, we'll make and attach the decorations. First, we'll crochet the main fabric piece. We'll use the diagonal crochet technique by increasing stitches first until we reach the desired length. Which corresponds to the diagonal at the center of the fabric. Then, we'll decrease stitches, crocheting back and forth to create a square shape. Throughout the process, we'll incorporate new yarn and change colors to form the intended pattern. The techniques involved are chains, double crochets, and slip stitches. Let me demonstrate the specific crochet method. For better visibility, I'll be using chunky yarn for this demonstration. The colors are chosen randomly. For specific yarn choices, color schemes, and hook sizes, refer to the product details page and pattern instructions. Let's start by casting on. Pick up the yarn with your right hand and wrap it around your left little finger. Pass it between your index and middle fingers. Use your left thumb and middle finger to hold the yarn end. Now, pick up the crochet hook with your right hand. Move the hook between these 2 points. Position the hook underneath the yarn. Wrap the yarn counterclockwise around the hook. There's a loop on the hook now. Pinch the crossing point of the loop with your left hand. Keep the hook on the left side of the yarn. Wrap the yarn. Draw the yarn through. This slip knot does not count as a stitch. Tighten the yarn end. Now, start crocheting a chain. Yarn over. Draw the yarn through again. That's 1 chain. Make 2 more chains. Including the starting chain. That makes 3 chains in total. Now, we'll make a fabric piece. Start with the first row. Chain 3 as the turning chain. Then, insert your hook into the stitch next to the turning chain, which is the 4th chain. Counting from the right. Remember, don't include the loop currently on your hook. You can see the chain forms a V-shaped braid on the right side. On the wrong side, there will be a ridge, a small raised horizontal bar. We'll work into the corresponding chain from the right side. Insert into the strand on top. Let me indicate the spot. So, you pick up this particular strand. Insert your hook and crochet. Yarn over once. Go into the correct position. Wrap the yarn. Draw the yarn through. Now, you have 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over once more. Pass through the first 2 loops. You'll be left with 2 loops. Yarn over and draw through. And there's your double crochet. I'll demonstrate the double crochet again. Yarn over. Pick up the top strand of the chain on the left. Yarn over and pull through. Wrap the yarn once more, then go through the first 2 loops on your hook. Repeat this twice. Once. Twice. Make 1 double crochet into the next chain space. Treat these 3 chains and 3 double crochets as one group for the pattern. Row 1 will have only one group. And that completes row 1. Move on to work row 2. Start where the previous row left off. Begin by making a chain of 3. When working back and forth, turn your work over. Turn it counterclockwise. Then pick up these 3 chains. Work one group here. Start with 3 chains. Make sure the back side of the chain is facing you. Pick up the top strand at the highest point of the chain ridge. That's the thread just above the little ridge. Make 3 double crochets one by one. If you're unsure about the placement, you can count from the right side of the chain. Once that's done, one group is finished. Slip your hook through the first group, next to the turning chain, into the large chain space. Right here. Go through this large chain space. Make a slip stitch. Yarn over. Draw the yarn through. Pull through all loops on the hook. The slip stitch is complete. Continue with another group right here. Start with a chain of 3. Into the same chain space, make 3 double crochets. Once done, the second row is finished. You've worked 2 groups in this row. Move on to the third row. Begin with a chain of 3. Then turn your work. Work into the top of these 3 chains. Make a group here. Make sure the back loop of the chain is facing you. Insert your hook into the top strand to crochet. You'll notice that every row starts with chaining 3, followed by turning and crocheting the group pattern. Each following row will have the same starting method. I won't go into detail after this point. When finished, work into the adjacent group. Find the gap between the turning chain and the double crochet. That's the space right next to the turning chain. Slip stitch into this space. Insert your hook. Yarn over. Draw the yarn through. Pull through all loops on the hook. Complete the slip stitch. Then work into the same chain space. Make a group. After that, continue into the gap between groups. The gaps for subsequent groups. Always refer to the space between the chain and the double crochet. I won't go into details later. Insert your hook into the gap. Make another slip stitch. And here, make another group. Once done, row 3 is complete. In this row, you've crocheted 3 groups. You can see the texture of this row. It corresponds to the first row. This is the right side of the fabric. The double crochet pattern looks neater. When distinguishing right from wrong sides later on, refer to the texture. Also, make sure the yarn tail is at the bottom right corner. Now, let's move on to row 4. Follow the same method as before. Start by casting on and crocheting one group. After completing it, slip stitch into the gap of the adjacent groups. Then, work the second group. Align the position of the following groups with the pattern. Use a slip stitch between the groups for a smooth transition. Keep going down the row. Once you've crocheted the last group, row 4 will be finished. This row consists of 4 groups in total. Proceed to crochet rows 5 through 10. Follow the same technique as before. Work the patterns back and forth. With each new row added, increase the number of groups in a row by 1. Please refer to the previous demonstration and the pattern instruction, and complete these rows. After finishing row 10, check the measurements with the pattern instruction. Once that's done, crochet row 11. Starting with this row, we need to incorporate yarns of different color. Please refer to the grid pattern for details. Each square represents one group pattern. At the starting point, join the required color. Pick up the matching yarn. From here onwards, I'm choosing colors randomly. Always consult the pattern instructions for specifics. Tie a slip knot with your yarn. Place it onto your hook. Draw through. Make any necessary adjustments. Be sure the knot doesn't show on the right side. Leave the replace color in place. Continue with the newly changed color. Start by crocheting 4 group patterns. Once done, the adjacent pattern should be worked with the previously replaced color. At this point, the yarn end should be positioned a few group patterns away from where you need to crochet. If this color won't be needed later on the corresponding spot, we'll cut the yarn. Leave a tail of about 10 centimeters. Cut the yarn. Leave the loose end for now. Then, attach the new yarn at the crocheting position. Put the previous yarn end to the wrong side of the fabric. Make sure it's the wrong side of the entire piece. Insert the hook into the next gap. Tie a slip knot with the yarn. Place it onto the hook. Draw it through all loops on the hook. You've now joined the yarn and completed a slip stitch at the same time. Give it a gentle tug to settle. Then, crochet 5 groups using this color. As you work, weave in the short end from the yarn attachment. When you need to change colors for the next group, put this yarn end to the wrong side of the fabric as well. Next, pick up the corresponding color. Join the yarn in the same way. Follow the same method as before. Tie a slip knot in the yarn. Insert the hook into the next gap. Draw the loop through. Now, draw through all loops on the hook. You've joined the yarn and made a slip stitch. Give it a little adjustment. Then, make one group. For the adjacent pattern, use the previous color. At this point, the yarn tail should be one group away from where you're crocheting. Also, this yarn will be needed later at the corresponding position. To maintain aesthetics and ease future stitching, we'll rejoin the yarn. A skein typically has 2 tails, one on the surface and one in the center. If you only have one skein, you can use the other end to join the yarn. If you have multiple skeins of the same color, you can simply reattach using another skein. The joining method remains the same. I won't go into details here. After that, make one group. And that completes the 11th row. Now, we move on to the 12th row. No new yarn is needed for this row. Change colors using the existing yarn. Start with the yarn along the edge. Make 2 groups at the beginning. When you turn it over here, since there's quite a bit of yarn, you might want to adjust the loops. Make sure to keep your yarn untangled. After that, you'll need to change colors for the next group pattern. Here, switch to the adjacent color. Tuck the previous yarn end to the wrong side of the fabric. Pick up the corresponding yarn. Gently tighten the yarn before changing colors. Insert the hook into the gap. Yarn over and pull through. Draw through all loops on the hook. Complete the color change. Also finish the slip stitch. Then, make one group using this color. For the next group, switch to the neighboring color. Follow the same method as before. Tuck the previous yarn to the wrong side of the piece, then pick up the corresponding yarn. Gently tighten the yarn. Always give a slight tug before changing colors from now on. I won't repeat this for every step. Now, insert the hook into the next gap. Yarn over and pull through. Draw through all loops on the hook. Complete both the color change and the slip stitch. Then, make 4 groups with this color. After that, switch to the adjacent color. Follow the same process. I'll skip the detailed explanation. When you encounter a yarn pull, weave it in as you crochet along. Continue with this color to finish the remaining part. Once you've completed the last group, row 12 is done. Move on to rows 13 through 15. No new yarn is needed for these rows. Simply use the existing colors for the color changes. Here are the key points to remember when changing colors. They were demonstrated earlier, so I won't go into detail here. Just refer to the pattern instructions. Crochet these 3 rows. Now, work on row 16. Again, change colors as before. Start by consulting the pattern instruction. Begin with 6 groups. After that, switch colors to work one group. Change to this neighboring color to continue crocheting. You won't need this color here or later. Leave a tail of about 10 centimeters and cut the yarn. Once done, use this color to crochet 8 groups. When you reach the last group, you'll need to add a new color. Pick up the corresponding color, join the yarn. Then make one group. And that completes row 16. Move on to work row 17. Start with the yarn tail along the edge. Make one group using this tail. For the adjacent group, you'll need to change colors. Switch to the neighboring color. The yarn end is already available nearby. Simply switch colors directly. Then crochet 9 groups. After completing, switch to this color for the next rows. Since the previous color is not needed here or later, cut the yarn. Leave a tail about 10 centimeters long. Cut the yarn. Use this color to finish crocheting the remaining part. Once you've completed the last group, row 17 is done. Continue crocheting the increase area. As you work through the pattern, when you need to add a new color, join the corresponding color using the previous method. If you run out of yarn in the middle, you can join a new yarn using the same technique. If the yarn end isn't near your current stitch, and it won't be needed in the corresponding spot on the next row, leave a longer tail, then cut the yarn. Rejoin at the correct position to continue crocheting. If that yarn will be needed again in the corresponding spot on the next row, Simply reattach a new one at that position. From here on, refer to the chart. Adapt as needed according to your project. Crochet using the appropriate method. All possible scenarios and solutions have been demonstrated earlier. Just complete the corresponding rows for the increase area. That concludes the increase area. Next, we'll work on the decrease area. The decrease section starts from row 41 in the fabric. For better visibility, I'll demonstrate with a solid colored swatch. This swatch has fewer rows. We'll only demonstrate the technique. In your actual project, refer to the chart for color changes and joining yarn. Both diagonal ends of the decrease section require a reduction in the pattern. Both diagonal ends of the decrease section require a reduction in the pattern. Turn the work. Slip stitch into the gap of the group pattern below. Then make one group. Work the group pattern in each corresponding space. Continue until you reach the inner side of the last group. After completing the inner side of the last group, slip stitch into the gap. No crocheting is needed after that. This way, you'll have one less group at both ends. That concludes the explanation for row 41. Move on to work row 42 downwards. Using the same method, start with a chain of 3. Turn the work. Slip stitch into the gap of the group below. Then make one group. Continue by working the group pattern in each corresponding spot. Once you've completed the last group, slip stitch into the adjacent group. Leave the rest unworked. That concludes the instructions for row 42. For the rows following, use the technique from the previous 2 rows. Just keep crocheting in the same manner. Here, there's only one group in the final row. After finishing it, slip stitch into the next group. When done, fasten off the yarn. Let me demonstrate how to fasten off the yarn using this swatch. Start by crocheting a chain to secure. Leave a little yarn tail. Now, break the yarn. Tighten the end. Tuck the yarn tail to the wrong side of the fabric. You can weave in several stitches for extra security. Trim any excess yarn tails. And that concludes the decrease area. Lastly, make sure to neaten up the yarn ends. I'll demonstrate with this swatch. The rows or patterns here are not for reference. Thread the yarn tail onto a yarn needle. Then, go through the top of the stitch. Into the loop of the braid. Pull tight. This is tantamount to tying a knot. Bring the yarn tail to the back side of the work. Weave it in to hide the end. For added strength, you can divide the remaining yarn tail into 2 halves. Take one section and weave it through the adjacent stitches. Then, tie the 2 yarn tails together securely. Combine the remaining tails and continue weaving it into the fabric. It's a good idea to weave in a few extra stitches. When dealing with short connecting yarn tails, you can also weave them in a few stitches within the fabric. Alternatively, you can simply trim them off to distinguish right from wrong sides. Keep the starting yarn tail intact. Treat the rest of the yarn tails in the same manner. Just weave them into the fabric. The technique is straightforward. I won't demonstrate it again. That concludes our tutorial on how to neaten up the yarn tails. So far, we've covered everything about crocheting the main fabric piece. With the main fabric complete, we'll move on to crocheting the border. Work along the edges of the fabric piece. Crochet in rounds. We'll be changing colors as we crochet. The new stitch techniques involve single crochets. Let me demonstrate. I'll use this swatch to show you the technique. Hold the fabric with the right side facing you. Locate any group along the edge. Insert your hook between 2 groups. Join the new yarn. The method is the same as before. Then, make 1 chain to start. This is the beginning chain for a single crochet, which doesn't count as a stitch. Make a single crochet in the same spot. Insert the hook. Yarn over. Draw the yarn through. Now, you have 2 loops on your hook. Yarn over again, and draw through both loops at once. 1 single crochet is complete. The braid on the top right counts its stitch. Chain 3 as a spacer. Then, continue by picking up the space between the next 2 groups. Make a single crochet. Insert the hook. Yarn over and draw through. Yarn over again, and draw through both loops on the hook. Single crochet is finished. Then, chain 3 as a spacer. Proceed by picking up the gap between 2 more groups to make another single crochet. Then, chain 3 as a spacer. Again, pick up the gap between 2 groups for another single crochet. I consider these 4 single crochets and the chains in between as one bridge pattern. Chain 5. Skip 1 group. Make a single crochet in the space between the next 2 groups. Continue working according to this bridge pattern. Separately, pick up the gaps between 2 groups and make 3 single crochets, with 3 chains between each single crochet. At this point, one bridge pattern is completed. Chain 5. Skip 1 groups below. Begin another bridge pattern from the group behind. Alternate between 5 chains and a bridge pattern. For each set of 5 chains, skip 1 group below. Following this method, keep going until you reach the group position right before the edge of this side. Once this bridge pattern is complete, you will reach the last group pattern at the edge. I consider the worked section as one side. Next, make a corner. Start with 5 chains as a transition. Then, work into the right angle of the group. Pick up any 2 strands of yarn to insert your hook. Make 1 double crochet there. Afterward, work another 5 chains as a transition. That completes one corner. Proceed by starting from the space between the next 2 groups. Crochet the next side. It's identical to the first side, so I won't go into details. Just follow the same steps. Once that's done, crochet the second corner. The process is the same as before. Begin with 5 chains for the transition. Work into the right angle of the edge group. Pick up any 2 yarn strands to insert your hook. Make 1 double crochet. Follow it up with another 5 chains for the transition. Finish the second corner. Continue crocheting, alternating sides and corners as you go. Work your way through the remaining sections. Pay attention to the double crochets in the corners. Always work into the right angle of the group pattern at the corner. Pick up any 2 strands to crochet into. After completing the last corner, slip stitch into the first single crochet. Locate the stitch of this single crochet, that's the one along this horizontal braid. Insert the hook and make a slip stitch. You can pull this slip stitch tight. It helps to distinguish the starting point later on. And that concludes the first round. Now, let's move on to the second round. Start with the yarn tail from before. Make 1 chain to begin. Remember, the chain doesn't count as a stitch. Then, pick up the next chain space to the left. Make a single crochet, followed by 3 chains as a spacer. Continue by picking up the next chain space and crocheting a single crochet. Again, chain 3 as a spacer. In the following space, work another single crochet. You've now crocheted across 1 bridge pattern. Next comes a large space created by 5 chains. Into this space, make 10 double crochets. For the following bridge patterns, individually, pick up the chain spaces and work single crochets. Between these single crochets, chain 3. When you encounter a large chain space made by 5 chains, make 10 double crochets. Follow this pattern, working your way along the edge until it's complete. Note that there are no chain between the single crochets and the double crochets. Once you've completed the side, you'll come down to a corner. Here, you'll find 2 large space with 5 chains each. Pick up each of these chain spaces separately. Make 10 double crochets into each. That completes the corner. Continue using the same method for the side and corner. Work your way through the remaining section. After finishing the last corner, insert your hook into the first single crochet and slip stitch. Tighten the yarn. And that concludes round 2. Now, we'll move on to round 3. It's similar to the previous round. Start by making 1 chain to begin. Then, work 1 single crochet into the chain space on the left. Follow with 3 chains as an interval. Into the next chain space, make 1 single crochet. At this point, you've crocheted over a bridge. For the following double crochets, individually pick up the double crochets. That's the braid on the top, right? Make a double crochet in each one. Once done, you'll reach the top of the next bridge. Pick up each chain space separately and work a single crochet. Between the single crochets, work 3 chains as an interval. In the double crochet section, pick up each stitch and work a double crochet accordingly. Moving along, whether at sides or corners. Work single crochets and chains above the bridges. Above the double crochet area, match each stitch with a double crochet. Continue this pattern, working your way around the entire round. After completing the last corner section, finish by slip stitching into the first single crochet. Tighten the yarn. We'll be changing colors later on. Cut the yarn here. Start with a chain to secure. Leave a little yarn tail. Cut the yarn. Give it a gentle tug to tighten. Weave in the ends into the fabric. That concludes the 3rd round. Now, let's move on to crocheting the 4th round. Pick up the corresponding color in any double crochet area from the previous round. Attach the yarn on the first stitch of the right side. Insert your hook into the double crochet here. Make a chain of 3 to start. Remember, this turning chain counts as 1 double crochet. Then, work a chain in between. Pick up and make a double crochet in each double crochet, 1 by 1. Follow with a chain between each double crochet. As you go, weave in any loose ends. Once you've completed a double crochet section, skip over the chain spaces above. Begin crocheting in the next double crochet section. Continue in the same manner. Work a double crochet into each stitch, 1 for 1, with a chain between each double crochet. Whether it's a side or a corner. For the double crochet areas, always make the double crochets and chains correspondingly. Pay attention to the spaces between each double crochet section. There's no chain as a spacer. When you encounter a chain space from before, simply skip it and don't crochet into it. Continue in this way, working through the remaining round. After completing the last area, make a slip stitch into the beginning chain. Count up 3 chains from the bottom. Pick up 2 strands of that chain. Then work a slip stitch. Tighten it up as usual. Then, cut the yarn when you're done. Tuck the loose ends into the fabric separately. And that concludes the 4th round. I consider the first 4 rounds as one crocheting sequence. In the corner sections, you create these larger waves. I'll refer to them as the big waves. In the side areas, between the bridges, you have small waves. Move on to the 5th round. The stitch pattern is the same as the first round, only the placement of your stitches will vary slightly. Choose any wave to work with. Here, I'm crocheting above a big wave. There are 19 chain spaces in this section. Counting from right to left, insert your hook into the second chain space. Join the yarn there. Make 1 chain to start. Then, work a single crochet in the same stitch. Follow that with 3 chains as a spacer. Skip 1 space to the left. Work a single crochet in the next chain space. Chain 3. Again, skip 1 chain space to the left. Make a single crochet in the following chain space. Chain 3. Skip another chain space. And make a single crochet in the corresponding stitch. That completes 1 bridge pattern. Work 5 chains. Then skip 1 chain space. Make a double crochet in the next chain space. Chain 5. That completes 1 corner. Skip 1 chain space behind. Make a bridge pattern below. Follow the same pattern as before. I'll skip the details here. After that, there's 1 chain space remaining at the bottom. Skip this one, don't crochet. Then work 5 chains. Next, you'll create a small wave. Start from the second space counting from the right to the left. Make 1 bridge pattern. Follow the same method as before. Skip 1 space between each single crochet. Once done, continue with 5 chains. Above the next small wave, make a bridge pattern accordingly. Repeat the bridge above each following small waves. Above the big wave, make a bridge on both sides separately. In the center, make 1 corner. Follow the same method as above the first big wave. Between each small waves, work 5 chains for transition. Continue in this manner. Crochet all the remaining sections. Finish by slip stitching into the first single crochet. Tighten the yarn. Don't change colors here. Do not cut the yarn at this point. And that concludes the explanation for the 5th round. Moving forward, continue crocheting according to the pattern sequence. In the areas with corners, crochet the big waves. Along the sides, work the small waves and bridges. Always switch colors for the last round of each wave. Refer to the pattern instructions for specific color choices. Now, please follow the previous demonstration and the chart. Simply finish crocheting the remaining part. After completing the last round of the border, cut the yarn, then finish the border. Now, I'll demonstrate how to finish the border. For this, I'll use this swatch as an example. After the slip stitch of the final round, don't pull too tightly. Stretch the loop gently. Leave a bit of yarn tail. Cut the yarn. Then, locate the double crochet on the left side. Insert your hook from behind into that stitch. Bring the yarn to the back. Then, insert the hook from behind through the braid of the slip stitch. That's the braid here. Work into the top half of the loop. Draw the yarn through. Give it a gentle tug to adjust. Tuck in the final yarn end into the fabric. To secure it well, you can split the yarn for weaving in the ends. The method for weaving in ends is identical to how we do it on the fabric piece. I won't demonstrate that here. And that concludes our tutorial for the border. If your piece isn't lying flat after finishing, you can gently steam block it by ironing on the wrong side.